When you have a great engaged employee base, a great engaged pool of talent, they're going to do great work, which is going to drive growth for your company. So it is a virtuous circle where you attract the best people, you listen, you engage, you action, and then you grow. And that's what we do our very darndest to make happen.
This is Doing the Right Things Well, a podcast that features conversations with leaders of America's best managed companies. I'm your host, Michael Kelly, the Executive Director of the Drucker Institute at Claremont Graduate University. The Institute is home to nearly a century of research on modern management thinking by Peter F. Drucker and those he inspired. For nearly a decade, we have published a ranking of America's best managed publicly traded companies. We base our model on their effectiveness with Drucker's 5 key principles: customer satisfaction, employee engagement and development, innovation, corporate social responsibility, and financial strength. 250 of those companies are highlighted in the Wall Street Journal each December. There are many great stories behind the data. Our goal of this podcast is to hear those stories directly from leaders of America's best managed companies and about the significance of their work contributing to a well-functioning society. Doing the Right Things Well is made possible by Claremont Graduate University, the Drucker School of Management, and the Charles Koch Foundation. To learn more about the Drucker Institute, please visit us at druckerinstitute.com. Welcome to another episode of Doing the Right Things Well by the Drucker Institute. And I'm really excited to say that I have the Chief Marketing Officer for Accenture, Joe Kramer. And if you don't know Accenture, you should by now, but it's a talent and innovation-led company. She'll tell more about it. But one of the things that really stood out when she mentioned she was willing to be on this podcast, I think it's amazing that your company in the last decade has grown from 100,000 employees to 800. And the reason I start off on that is, one, is you are showing up as one of America's best managed companies year after year, according to how the Drucker Institute ranks America's best managed companies. So can we start a little intro of you, who you are, and the title, if there's something that needs to be added to the title, and a little bit about the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me, Michael. I'm thrilled to be here. Yes, I am Jill Kramer. I am the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at Accenture. And to your point, there is that second C in that title. And when you work at a company with 800,000 people, that communications part is so important. We're a professional services company, and part of keeping that culture and keeping people connected across the vast areas of expertise and geographic territories that we have is how we communicate and stay connected. I've been at Accenture for 9 years now. It has truly gone by in the blink of an eye. Came here to manage advertising and then brand, and I've been privileged to be in this job for 3, almost 4 years now. Also has gone by in the blink of an eye. And that spirit, that sense of being a well-managed company, I'll tell you, when I took my job here, I called my husband afterward and I said, if they offer me that job, I'm going to take it. And he said, well, tell me more about it. I said, I don't even really know that much about it. All I know is I really liked everyone I met. And I think that there is a culture that no matter how big we've grown, is prevalent here. It's a culture of people who are really determined to do the right thing, super tenacious, but very accessible. So I love that combination of people who are smart, driven, and accessible. And I've found that here through every one of my 9 years. And it's one of the things I love most about being here.
Your background just lends so well to the Drucker philosophies and how we rank companies according to customer satisfaction, employee engagement, innovation, corporate social responsibility, and financial strength. And as you know, Drucker was really big on the marketing piece, marketing and innovation, and really like you can't exist without the customer as you talk about the client.
That's right.
And all the work there. And I feel like that's, a big thread. Kind of like to go down that path a little of, your journey and the position you're in and how you really think about that customer, which really drives the success of all of this.
Yeah. My career has ended up skewing B2B. through my agency time. And then, of course, here in the roles I've held at Accenture. And a lot of times for anybody who's had an agency-based career, a lot of times you rotate and you want to work on different accounts and you want to, try different disciplines, which of course I did through my growing up. But I was always a little bit in love with the B2B side. And I think it's because that customer/client relationship was something I could really sink my teeth into, really seek to understand. When you have a B2B relationship, you're relying on something and a partnership and a promise that is not only critical to you as a human being and to your career, but everyone who works for you, with you, and around you. So the depth of that relationship is really important. There's a lot of trust, and it's not superficial. You have to be able to meet and attend to that client or customer in many, many ways over a long period of time, and across complex concepts and change and evolution and challenge. And so I always felt that really investing in that relationship, it drove my love of B2B without a doubt. And I love the culture here at Accenture. Client centricity is just core to our values. And so I love that my job lets me help various leaders and humans across the organization connect with their clients and tell our story.
And that kind of, the Drucker philosophy of the communication, right? And communication, pushing it down, and then the empowerment of people that work throughout the company. Because, right, you have multifaceted role. You've got to communicate the company itself. You got to make sure that the lines of communication are really open with the clients and hearing what they value. And then you've got the communication probably internal, right, too.
Yep. All
of
of the above. And it was very intimidating to me. I came here again through advertising and then brand. The communication side of this job is critical, and it's important, and it's massive. But I've learned a lot through, and I think that whereas I may have shied away from a role that was communications oriented, although that was my original career path. I was a communications major and specialist when I graduated. I think that as a brand person, you need to know your company in and out to really express the brand in a way that's highly authentic, that is in and of your DNA. And the fact that this is a marketing and communications job, it lets you feed each side of your heart, your brain, your creativity across the internal and external, and it's incredibly helpful.
Mm-hmm. And how do the world moves so fast nowadays, and everybody's like putting content out,
Yep.
putting a message and all that other stuff is one of the big things. Like, you're a leader in change, but you got to be able to adapt and change and have people follow. I noticed, AI is a big thing.
Yep.
And the idea around data and the technology, and kind of what I like about the podcast is we have tons of data, but there's stories behind it we want to tell. Is what are some of the things that you like incorporating? You're learning that are really propelling things forward.
It's everything right now. I mean, if you think about what we do as marketing communications professionals for this company in this moment in time, our agility is unprecedented. Our clients need to know where Accenture is, what we think, what we've learned, and how we can help on topics and situations and challenges and opportunities that are evolving faster than they ever have in history. And I can't have a marketing team or belabor the marketing professionals in my organization with process and things that don't let them be agile, don't let them be where the business needs us to be and where our clients need us to be. And how are we keeping up with that pace of change for our clients and keeping everyone informed internally simultaneously? And that's where technology comes in, but it's also where deep understanding of the way you work comes in, and where the ability to help the human beings that work with you have great capacity for change and great resilience in an ever-changing environment. How do you turn that into fuel and energy as opposed to exhaustion? And you need to be very intentional and build a company and a function that's able to work that way. And the good news is right now, there are technologies that make that type of a vision and that type of a dream a reality. Because if you were trying to move as fast as the world is moving right now using old methods, old technology, you'd be absolutely exhausted.
Yeah, and it's what, as Drucker would always say, like the organs of the organization, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
the people, the manager, and the leadership, and everything else. And so one of the things I really love about Accenture, it's multiple, and I think that's why you're always ranking like in the top 1, 2, or 3 in corporate social responsibility. Is corporate social responsibility just isn't saying I'm going to go do something good in the community, donate some money. It could also be through the work, the mission itself.
That's right.
Because if you look at how you were able to bring in all those hundreds of thousands of people in a world where everything's moving so quickly, and getting them to not just they want to be there, they figured out they're going to figure out they want to be there. You provide them the support, and you're looking at a diversity with the demographic shifts of diversity of workers,
Mm-hmm.
the skills that are different around the world. But my other part of it too is like your clients and helping with their workforce development
Yep.
and their hiring practices. So it's
Well,
like it's multifaceted.
exactly. And it's a virtuous circle. I mean, our purpose here at Accenture is to deliver on the promise of technology and human ingenuity. And for a company as big and complex as we are, that's a very small set of words, but they're very intentional. That concept of delivering on a promise is our predisposition to make things actually happen. Accenture can figure it out and get it done. So we believe that there is great promise in the combination of technology and humans. And then we know exactly how to deliver on that promise. And when you do that, you want to do it for all, for yourselves in the way our company runs, for our clients in the way their enterprises run, and for the communities in which we work and live. And we talk about the fact that having those strong communities is part of our long-term strategy because that is where we work and live. And you mentioned our talent strategy, which is to be able to attract and retain the best talent in the world. And that means you want to be in these communities where people who have, a diversity of thought, experience, expertise, want to come toward Accenture and want to bring their time and talent here. And so these things are all very, very interconnected. And it's doing the work to understand what makes us all get up every day. How do we do that in a way that grows our company, but also grows our communities, and allowing people to use their time and talent and flex those muscles on all fronts is part of what I think we're exceptionally good at.
I mean, what do you see as some of the things that you've done? You don't have to give away your proprietary secret stuff, but that you're done internally to, as you think about happy customer, really it's a happy employee,
Yeah.
providing that level of service
Mhm.
from their first day in on the job, or even the mid-level people. Is it some of you going back to like the Drucker, like the fundamentals really are their difference?
Well, we do have a philosophy here, and that is that we really want people to be what we call net better off for having worked at Accenture. So I just told you I've been here 9 years, right? If I look back and we find that it has 4 key dimensions. Do I work for a purpose? Right. And can I personally connect with what that is? So it's not just at the corporate level, it's very much at a personal level. And do I have a sense of well-being across many dimensions, financial, physical, and mental? Do I have marketable skills? That's the skills part, right? Where you're constantly saying, that's why all of the money that we invest every year on learning for our people is a reality. That's how we keep our people at the cutting edge, which means they're doing the best work for our clients, but also personally, we all know we're being kept at the cutting edge of the most relevant skills at this point in time. And then finally, are you connected with strong relationships? And we always ask people, like, do you have a best friend at work? Like, who do you have? Like, when you come in, and it's part of what I love about my job, My job is not easy by any means, but I never feel like I'm in it alone. I have colleagues across disciplines in different parts of the company, in different parts of the world, who I know all I have to do is pick up the phone and say, I'm struggling with something, or I need help, or I can't figure this out. And they're there. And those are the dimensions we are incredibly intentional about. And we have programs where we survey and we listen and we're able to action what we hear, because that's what drives people feeling like they can speak and be heard, and action will be taken. And then that leads to their own personal leveling of engagement. And when you have a great engaged employee base, a great engaged pool of talent, they're going to do great work, which is going to drive growth for your company. So it is a virtuous circle, where you attract the best people, you listen, you engage, you action, and then you grow. That's what we do our very darndest to make happen.
And then that's what it jumps out at me when I think about everything you just said is the research that's coming out more and more in the development of social capital, right? Whether you know it or not, back in the intentionality is you're helping everybody develop social capital. And that's a big part of, like, Drucker, you talk about you can't manage others until you manage yourself. And obviously, I think leaders like yourself have really learned how to manage yourself, which lends to managing others' relationships with others really well. And then that gives you the ability to, right, allocate resources,
Yeah.
people and the money in the right ways.
And even think about it right now, today, with all of the technology change that's happened in the past year or 2 years, I want to be my own self, a person who's in the driver's seat when it comes to technologies like Gen AI, who are having substantial impact on my craft, on both marketing and communications. I want to be surrounded with the best minds, who understand the best uses, the way you reimagine work, the way you help people learn and change and grow. That is a very empowering position, which breeds a positive outlook on the technology and the possibility, as opposed to feeling removed. Nobody's telling me about this. Nobody's teaching me how to keep up. No one's showing how it's going to affect the way I work and the work I do. And that transparency and the trust that comes with it changes your perspective. And I think that's what comes up with the tone and tenor of a company and a culture.
And the thing I love, like, just all these words that pop into my head, right? The authenticity, sincerity. You can, like, feel it when you walk into organizations. You talk to people from those organizations. And one of the neat things when I'm chatting with you, I was thinking about different questions and thinking my own life is whenever I had to report to a really high level person, you can't always glean right away information on how they think, why they think in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And the direction they might go in, or what they think about, your growth as an employee and all this other stuff. So tying that into the social capital piece, I always find it interesting as, like, why is hard things, you do the hard things, it gets easier. You do the easy things, it gets harder. People like yourself, you do the hard things because they get easier. Like, that question to you is like, is there a time that you've had to use that social capital that you learned to develop on something that was challenging? To
gosh, yeah.
persuade somebody? That was there like a neat story that kind of shows?
Yeah, I think you always are. I think you're always, trust breeds trust, right? So if you ask for someone's support, and I think that's an important part of the equation, that you're transparent about an idea, a mission, a need you have. You ask for their support, you understand how they're invested in it with you, you deliver upon that, then the next time you want to try something. And what happens, especially in my field, is creativity will push you out of comfortable boundaries. And so being able to say, I want to do something that's very different and it may not work. When I first started, to our point about I have an advertising and brand background, yet I was the marketing and communications leader. One of my first learnings here was, at our size and as fast as we were growing, we were communicating internally in a very old-fashioned way. And the data, the volume of communications and the interaction and engagement with those communications did not indicate that it was successful. So we put on the table, okay, what if we were starting today at an organization of this size? what would we want to create? And we came up with something very simple. If you think about it, if you all walked through the same door in the morning, wouldn't it be nice if someone just said good morning and then said, here's what you need to know and here's what you need to do? Like, I just want to say good morning. Here's what you need to know and here's what you need to do. So we said, okay, how do we make that true for 700 or 800,000 people? And we came up with a concept called Good Morning Accenture. And it's highly personalized, multi-channel way that the bulk of our people get information on a daily or weekly basis. And literally it will tell you everything from where you are with your timesheets, compliance training, leaders who may have changed positions or come into Accenture for the first time. But really it tells you what you need to know and what you need to do. And it makes it easy. You don't have to say, oh, the legal team is telling me I've got to do my compliance training over here, and HR is telling me I have to do my performance achievement over here, and operations is telling me my timesheets are overdue over here. It's all packaged for me. And literally every single day we just say good morning, ideally with a fun or helpful something to make you smile as you start your day. But when I did that, it was scary. And putting it on the table, it was undeniable that the way we were communicating to preserve that made no sense. But it was not a given that the new idea would take off and would be successful. And in fact, we had to ask a lot of leaders of Accenture to stop doing what their muscle memory was to keep sending out email. And so we were asking for a lot of trust. And, the transparency of this is what we're basing it on. This is why we think it will work. We want all of you to be part of the process. We'll tell you if it's working. We'll tell you if it's not. We'll be very proactive in those communications. It turned out to be a fantastic success. And we use it today. And we did a recent communication survey where people have said it's their preferred method to get information of all the ways that we can communicate with them. So it turned out to be a good thing. So then what happens is when you get the next crazy idea, you say, okay, you get that capital in the bank. But if we had done this without being transparent about the why, kind of baking it without asking for input, just launching it and not saying you're critical to its success, that would have been a whole different dynamic. So that concept of that transparency, that inclusion, that collaboration and partnership when you're making big changes, it's not only the social capital you've already gained, but you're filling that bank account regularly when you're taking on change, depending on how you take on that change. And I think that being able to prepare people, let them know what to expect, what you know, what you don't know, and ask for their input is a key part of the process.
Yeah, and I think about it's part of, especially when you get higher up, making sure there's not the disconnect from the first hire to someone who's been there for a while. It's if people see that leadership is living the values, they're walking around and they're an embodiment of it. Yeah, it's just, I know Drucker would always talk about culture is the task at hand.
Mm-hmm.
I would say culture persists. But when I think about, if you're willing to do anything in the right way to promote the purpose, the mission, the vision, and all that other stuff about the company, people seeing you doing every day, it's significant. And it goes back to, I keep on thinking about the idea, the fundamentals are the difference.
Yep. Without a doubt. It's the basics. It's the always going back to and not forgetting the important basic foundational steps and skipping ahead and leapfrogging over things, which can happen when you move quickly, when you feel under pressure, when you want to make sure you're driving to a positive result. But it is that it's that mix of consistency of the good stuff and changing up the things that that could work better that tend to pay off.
So the Jill I'm talking to today is not the Jill that I could have been sitting next to in an economics class at
That's right.
both at UMass Amherst. And
that's right.
When I learned, you mentioned you took some economics, and I do remember that it's like back in 91, 92, it was a male-dominated field.
Yep.
And you did notice if there was a woman sitting in the room too.
Yep.
You've made a shift, because I'm always fascinated. I've made my career on understanding what people do, not just the behavior, what they do, why they do it, but how do they ultimately get into a profession, a career, a job, and then what forms them, where some end up achieving levels of success that others don't, or people just, they qualify, not qualify, but they look at their success differently, as in they want to have different balances and all that other stuff. So now you kind of look back, as you mentioned in another podcast, something about a book you had read on a vacation
Yeah.
about, kind of allows you to look back a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think? I always think there's certain things that along my career path that either people intervened or I did something in particular that's always helped me move me along. And if you look a little reflectively now on all of this and where you are, what's something that you might think that might jump out at you?
I've learned in my time here at Accenture, because we do Gallup strengths, and I've learned a lot about my strengths. And it's funny, when I look back now on my path, it makes complete sense to me. But I used to tell people that when people would ask me as I became more successful in my career, oh, tell me about your career path. What can I learn for your career path? And I would say, you don't want to learn from my career path. It really makes no sense. I hopscotched around and I did this and I did that. And it was always about my husband, my parents, my family, my kids. And then I realized, no, actually, that's the worst advice. And it doesn't recognize that every decision I made in my career was based on something I loved. The people I loved working with, the people I wanted to be near, my family, watching my husband's career excel and supporting him. And it was only until very recently when I heard my daughter explaining my career to one of her peers, where she said, my mom always chose what happiness. My mom always chose love. And I worked at places probably far too long, where a more savvy person might have made a jump here or a jump there, and I could get a better title here, because I loved the people I was working with, and I loved the accounts I was on, or the founders that had founded the agency that I was so privileged to be at, or because I wanted to be closer to my two nieces. At one point, we made a move decision based on that. They were just all things that just made me happy. And when I understand what drives me, when I am happy, I am highly productive. I'm so energized. Everything else just falls into place. So I was downgrading the fact that I did have a career path and I did have a driving set of decision-making criteria, which was, and even within a job, you can take project A or project B. One might have been clearer in terms of, oh, this is going to get you higher profile, seen, but this one sounds like a lot of fun and I think I could do great at it. I'd always go for the one that was a lot of fun. Now, on the being a woman during that career arc, I will tell you, there have always been mentors or sponsors, or just fairy god people who helped me along the way, who said, recognize your own success here, recognize your own power here. Let me help you feel comfortable in this space. I know it can be intimidating. And they are people who most of them I'm still in contact with today, because they were incredibly formative to who I am, and the advice that they gave me from my very first job out of college, I still think of today. And that's saying a lot, that those are people who had impact. And I hope I have even a small percentage of impact on other people that they had on me.
Yeah, it's nice because we're not always fully confident in ourselves, right? We're our own worst critics. But granted, we're having this interview, but from everything I've seen, you exude confidence, right? But it's tested a lot.
Yes.
And how do you? So I look at it as what's formed your life. I've discovered some things, but how do you take that? Because you look at, with age comes wisdom, then it's the race to use it, as my friend would say.
I love that.
And you think about it, so you can't accelerate wisdom, but we're gaining wisdom with all the experience we have, good and bad. You can accelerate their success with having them understand their bad experiences, learning better judgment, and all that other stuff. So how do you take that role that you have as a leader? And you had talked about another interview, talking about contribution, right? Making sure everybody does have a contribution to the overall goal of the organization. Some of the things that you've learned in your career, because you can't mentor everybody, but internally of your team, are there certain things that you've learned that you've been successful incorporating from what you've learned personally in your journey to your team? That's kind of things they wouldn't say in business school or management school.
Yeah, one of the biggest things is that nothing deteriorates your own self-confidence and therefore your decision-making capability more than not putting everything out in the open. That that to when you hoard something, when you hold it back, you're trying to keep it over here and make it perfect, and then, oh no, maybe something goes wrong and I hadn't brought anybody in. Like, that is such it deteriorates everything. It doesn't pull in all of the talent. Anytime you're being insular, alarm bells should go off. I always feel better when I ask for every opinion. There was one of those people who had a big impact on my career, was challenging me on a presentation I was making and kept trying to say, well, why don't you do this? And why don't you go that way? And I said, who's making this presentation? You or me? And he said, now you're ready to go present. Your sense of conviction just went through the roof. And it's that concept of peer editing, asking for advice versus stay in your swim lane. This is mine. I'll tell you when it's ready. It makes everything you do better, but it also gives you this feeling of someone else will catch something that you didn't. So I am very big of, I always tell people that all the time, put it in the sunlight. Like, we'll all take a look at it. Once all of a sudden those shadows go away because you realize, wait, I'm not bearing all this on my own, and I have the benefit of other people. And then the second one is something I was just discussing today, which is, I do tend to have a very positive outlook, which does, it's not a false or toxic positivity. It's based in what I really believe. But as a teammate and as for whomever I'm working for, am I bringing them issues or am I bringing them solutions? And bringing them solutions allows you to bring the issues forward, but with that spin on, I think we could make something better than this. And it's really interesting when you just listen to how many people want to tell you the what's wrong part. And one of the biggest things I've learned is, if you're just quiet, do they ever come around to the solution? And if not, that's where you do have to coach people. And you do have to give that direct feedback that here's everything you put on the table. Now, where were the solutions that went with it? You don't always have to have it all figured out, but I'm wondering if we can go this way. It's just the mindset of it is very different. Are you tearing down or are you building up? Are you exposing a problem just to point at it? Or are you exposing a problem to raise your hand and say, I'll help fix it?
And that makes me think of a line, just being a parent too, right? Be less furious and more curious.
Yes.
And it goes back to the humanistic part of all of this, that when I do career day at the schools, it's like, you say, look, that person there, your teacher, she's a human being too.
Yeah.
Right? Your principal's a human being. Everybody has their things that's going on. And I think that's just a critical part that, right, we tend to overlook sometimes, that everybody that reports to you has had a different experience, different role models, different ways of learning behaviors. And it is that part of being able to shift it. Because if you're an organization of change and adaptability, the cool part about it is not everybody, walks the talk when it comes to actually training employees, knowing that as they're being trained, it might pull them away from providing to the client, but ultimately the return on investment is really big. The one that struck me a few years ago when I was harping on something with my chair of my board, the think tank I ran, I had to stop and think to myself, and I had this aha moment. It's like, what is it like to manage Michael Kelly? When I'm pushing on something that I feel is important and doing that persuading, using my social capital. Did you ever have that aha moment? Because I know you report to the big boss, so the chain of command is a little shorter now, but that moment's like, wow, what is it like to manage Jill Kramer?
Well, it's funny because very early in my career, I had a client and he was doing his reviews of everyone on his team. And it was a client I used to go and I would sit on site once a week. And it happened to be the time it was the day I was sitting on site. And he said to me, you need to learn how to under promise and over deliver. You are the most can-do person I've ever met, but you put out, I'm going to do this. And he's like, temper those expectations and over deliver. And I went home and I was so mad. I'm like, can you believe that, I was like, I'm trying to do the best I can. But I think about it to this day, introducing me to that concept of don't just say yes to everything. Don't just go and do everything. Be incredibly thoughtful, because your time and talent is a non-refillable resource. Like, you only have so many hours in the day. So what are you doing? Don't just go and sign up for everything and promise everything. Fast forward now to today. And I'll give you a parent moment in the middle. Actually, it's similar with being a parent. You know, my kids always say to me, Mom, you're a lot. Like, you always have 8 ideas, and we can cook 27 dishes, and we can have 15 desserts, and let's have everybody over for this holiday. That is my predisposition. So what have I learned is that if I'm spraying the fire hose at my boss, that's not going to help him or her. Like, you just need to take a minute and say, I have a whole bunch of ideas I'm excited about. I always like that to be known. 15 things in the hopper. I'm thrilled with all of them. Here's 3 I think are going to make a massive difference for you, and I'd like your time on right now. So for me, it's about tempering the energy, honing like the focus and the force of what you're going to do, and giving people that breath to keep up. But I do think, again, going back to, I tend to work for people who love that energy and want more of that, and know that you're going to make things happen, and you're going to be incredibly thoughtful about when you do it. But it is funny that Mom, you're a lot statement aligns very closely to my tendency to make a lot of promises. It's just definitely who I am at my core.
Yeah, I mean, like, right, kids tend to be candid.
Yep.
Right? They kind of see things for the way they are,
Yep.
kind of right in front of them. And so on this, I think one of the other interesting things, I think when we spoke prior, talking about, it's like every great movie, the difference between continuity and change and the friction in between. Because you found your practices, your habits to become successful. And as you keep on being successful because of that, things do change. Or someone might present a different worldview that you're not used to, or somebody might come in and say, hey, I got some feedback on you or your team or something else. Is, I know innovation is a big piece of what you think about.
Yep.
With everything going on, is, overall the company, like, how has the company really succeeded and on the innovation piece and harnessing innovation for adaptability? And what has your contribution been to that?
I think that how we at Accenture harness innovation has changed over the years as our span, our areas of expertise, and our size has changed. But what we remain committed to is taking the time to recognize innovation, celebrate innovation, and then scale that innovation. So we have something at Accenture called the V360s. And we talk about creating 360-degree value for all stakeholders. Well, we recognize that, and we do awards in order to celebrate the fact that you solve that problem differently. You figured that out for this client, with this client, on your team, for your team. And we do take the time to celebrate it. And then we say, okay, if we did that once, could we do it 100 more times? And how many more clients or teams or people could we help? So I think that spirit of the fact that innovation is at our core, yes, it happens organically, but the intentionality behind pausing, reflecting, seeing it, celebrating it, and scaling it is something that we are incredibly diligent about. Personally, I have the privilege of being a part of that system and making sure on the communication side that we do celebrate it and we lift it up and we give ourselves that moment to do. And every single year we do those awards, and I've been moved to tears every single time when you tell this team you won this, depending on when we're hosting, it could be someone who's in Japan or India or California. They could be anywhere. And the team's reaction to knowing they won their category is something that is priceless every single time. So I love being a part of that celebration. I think personally, I have a mantra that if you're always doing something, so it's that balance to your point between continuity and change. So what are those foundational elements that you're going to be rigorous on, you're going to practice, and you're going to keep them at your core? And then where are the things that you are going to change and go, wait, I've been doing this quite a few times and I don't even know why I'm doing it anymore. I'm going to pause and reflect, and I'm going to challenge this whole concept. Those innovations, large and small, have a big impact on the way a team works, and I consider that to be my privilege and my responsibility for all of marketing, which means that sometimes I'm the one asking, but why do we do that? And what if we didn't do it? And I think those are two questions that anybody at Accenture would tell you on the marketing team I'm pretty well known for, but why are we doing it? And then there might be 5 or 6 whys that follow that up. And then the what if we didn't?
Yeah, right. It's just a simple question
Yep.
that goes behind. Like I always think too, that back to the training is you've got the difference between the brain and the mind. And this is really germane to AI, right? You could have AI manipulate the brain like the cell phone / slot machine does, or you could take AI and really harness it to explore the whole your brain and how it thinks and that prompt engineering and everything else. So one of the things I'm thinking about, I paraphrase this quote from Voltaire that I seem to love lately is, in an uncertain world, certainty is absurd, right? And we live in this uncertain world. We always have been, right? Times were pretty tough 100 years ago. It's just the players have changed a lot. And so in that, I know people have asked you before, like what keeps you up at night and all that other stuff. I'll look at it this way. In an uncertain world where there's no certainty, even with all the data that you have, even all the wisdom and the experiences you have, I look at you as a person that is inspired by that uncertainty. So now I would say if that's right, I hope I'm right. But I would look at like, now what goes on in the brain of Jill? I'm like, okay, there is a little higher level of uncertainty starting this month, this week, this year. What am I going to do to sit down with a notebook? Do I go for a walk? What are the first things I write down to question myself before I ask somebody else the questions?
Yep. And giving yourself the time and the space and understanding what gives your mind peace to figure out those things. So you're not just in constant drive mode. And you balance that with reflection. And I think that to your point about not only the uncertainty, but the pace of that constant change and uncertainty could allow us to just get in drive mode and really forget about the reflection part. And is this worth my team's time, talent, and energy? Or are we just spinning our wheels? And there's times when it's okay to say, I'm done now. We tried this. We gave it a great effort, or even we're going to put this on pause. And that's why that question, what if we didn't, is so important. Because if all you do is keep adding to your responsibility and try to innovate on top of that, and you don't say what you could stop doing and where you can pause, you're not going to be able to keep fueled, and you're not going to be able to keep inspired. And I always talk about that permission to pause. It's okay to stop that. It's okay to stop an idea that you thought was going to be great, but now you think the ROI is looking a bit upside down. It's okay to say, I've done this for 10 years, but I don't think we need to do it anymore. And I'm doing 5 things that are more important. It's okay to say stop. And sometimes we don't give ourselves that permission and that space to reflect and then say, this phase is done. This tactic has run its course. It's not that it wasn't, that saying about change is not an indictment of the past. It's just the recognition that you need to do things differently going forward. But we forget that, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves.
Going back to, what I've learned, yes, leaders that have been successful, they're always the one, they want a little disagreement, they want a little pushback, but they understand how to be patient. They understand how to, what you said, take that pause. Because, everybody always introduces, so you got to do breathing exercises and all that. It's like, yeah, breathing works in certain situations, but if you look at the best, the kind of the most accomplished people, like they have a little kind of myopicness about them in their focus, but they know at certain points in life, you got to take a pause. You got to step back and think about it. It really is.
And it's silly, but I'm a big believer in the to-do list. So my to-do list has gone from notebook to iPad to, whatever it might be. But when I see that list getting too long, that's when the colors come out. Whether my Apple Pencil changes to fuchsia or I grab the red pen, it's like I'm going to circle in color the things that actually are going to make a difference, and the rest of these things are going to go on next month's to-do list. And that is that's part of that reflection and privilege, that you take that time to look and say, oh, look, I added 15 more things to the to-do list. Now let's be realistic. Maybe that person who gave me that advice not to overpromise was right all those years ago. I finally learned how to say, I'm not going to possibly do all these things, do all of them well, give the team the time they need. So these are my things. And I've done that now. And it is beautiful where technology has taken us. But I always say, okay, here's my hot list. These are the 5 hot things. And here's on my team on one, in one place, one forum where we all gather electronically and virtually. These are the people I'm considering on point for these. These are the most important things I'm doing. I think that's incredibly helpful when you know what your boss, what their top 5 is, and what's your role in those top 5. That's empowering to the people. And it helps you understand why I'm not on his or her top 5 right now. I understand that. My item is 6, 7, or 8. And I need to be patient for a minute. So there's a lot of value for the exercise of forming those to-do lists, those hot lists, those top 10 lists, and then being transparent about them and letting people participate in them with you.
Yeah, I don't do the color coding. I have my list. Then I'm like, if there's really priorities, I have another piece of paper that says, these are the 3 things I have to get done today.
I love some good color coding.
Yeah. Okay. So part of what, with the Drucker Institute is, Peter's not with us anymore, is the messages.
Yep.
The messages are key getting out there. And I'm part of this. I'm starting to argue that I believe that Drucker and all the work that he did connecting past and present he was AI 1.0.
Yep. Pretty on point, right?
With everything that he collected and all the historical stuff, all the way back to the great philosophers and all the thinkers and the leaders on management and the influence that he's had. Is there, probably sometimes the podcast to some folks is like a reintroduction of Drucker and all that. I think I shared some quotes and all that.
I was talking about one with the team just the other day, which is the management is doing things right and leadership is doing the right thing. And I think it goes to your point about uncertain times, because I'll say why that resonates with me right now, because first of all, that's a lesson you need to learn, because it is a step when you go from being a team member to being a manager, and then from being a manager to being a leader. And then there's also the concept of you can do that during easy times and you can do that during hard times. And the conditions under which you are trying to do those right things should not be overlooked. And you need to give yourself some grace around the conditions, because the conditions I'm leading this team in is very different than my predecessor, was very different than her predecessor. So recognizing that, I love that statement. And the fact that the conditions under which you are trying to be true to that statement vary a lot, and that matters.
Great. So as you wrap up, 2 simple, straightforward questions.
Okay.
1, do you have a favorite pizza place in Amherst? Do you remember?
Oh, gosh. Favorite, I wasn't that pizza oriented in Amherst. Is that a terrible thing to say? I mean, Judy's isn't there anymore, but the Popovers were my be all end all.
Oh, yes, yes. One other question. I think I threw it out at the last guest. I don't know where it was. Are there any I told you so is a year from now that you have in your head? You're like, I think this is what's going to happen. I think there's going to be a shift here and anything else that we're like, I told you.
I think we're already midway, so this is a little bit of a cheat. I do have a notebook behind me that my sister gave me that is called "Things I Was Right About." That I love. I love that notebook. But I think that we are going to find that Gen AI was the greatest gift to marketing ever, because it allows us to explore very deeply all the subjects we are curious about, and curiosity breeds creativity. I think that it's never easy to embrace new things and new ways of working. And sometimes it's a little scary and you can feel challenged in your craft. But I think we will look back and say, gosh, do you remember when we tried to work without that? And we'll just recognize the complete empowerment and the liberation of expansive of where our mind can go that we'll be grateful for.
I love it. Jill, on behalf of CGU, the Drucker Institute, and all of us, thank you so much for spending an hour with us. And so thank you for everything.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed every minute of it. It was a lot of fun to be here.
We thank you for listening to Doing the Right Things Well podcast. We'd also like to thank the Charles Koch Foundation for its generous funding to help make this podcast possible. The Charles Koch Foundation works to ensure all people have the opportunity to live a life of meaning and contribution based on their unique gifts and aptitudes. They do this by investing in the social entrepreneurs who can transform the institutions most responsible for lifelong learning, post-secondary education and business, and empowering people to engage in work that benefits everyone. To learn more about the Charles Koch Foundation, please visit charleskochfoundation.org. That's Charles, K-O-C-H, foundation.org. Please do subscribe to the Drucker Institute's YouTube, Spotify, and Apple podcast channels to listen to more episodes in this series.